Nick Walker has the best back poses in the world today, but can he challenge the best back of all time? Today, we're putting him head to head against Dorian Yates himself, using what I believe are the best versions of both athletes. For Nick, it's the recent 2026 Tampa Pro. For Dorian, I chose his 1995 physique over his 1993 version because he was noticeably bigger and fuller, qualities he'll absolutely need when going up against a modern open bodybuilder like Nick Walker. Front double biceps. And this is where the problem with the 1995 version of Dorian begins. By then, he was coming off the horrific biceps tear he suffered in 1994, so this pose was always going to suffer. But for all the 1993 fans out there, let's bring up that version as well and see whether it could actually beat Nick in this pose. As we can see, even before the injury, the front double biceps was never one of Dorian's strongest poses. Meanwhile, Nick has some of the most complete arms we've ever seen, with massive peaked biceps that completely dominate Dorian's. Of course, this pose isn't judged on the arms alone. When it comes to overall flow, Dorian is clearly superior. At least compared to Nick, he displays a much tighter waist, and combined with those unbelievably flaring lats, he easily wins the taper battle. As for the legs, I actually think they share a similar weakness. Neither has exceptional quad sweep. Dorian's photo is taken from a lower angle, which flatters his legs quite a bit, so don't let that fool you. His quads were never especially wide, particularly not in 1993. Nick, on the other hand, is certainly blockier, but his reinvented waist is completely under control, and he's displaying deeply carved abdominals as well. Now, if we're comparing the 6 weeks out photoshoot version of Dorian from 1993, I'd actually give him this pose. But his stage version came in so dry that he lost a lot of fullness, and I don't think it would hold up nearly as well against today's open competitors. So using the 1995 version, which I believe is the fairest comparison because of the added size and fullness, this first pose clearly goes to Nick Walker. Front lat spread is next, and this might be the biggest gap we've ever seen between two elite bodybuilders in a single pose. Dorian Yates is arguably the greatest front lat spread poser of all time. Nick Walker, on the other hand, despite all the improvements he's made, is still one of the weakest elite open competitors we've ever seen in this pose. The difference in structure, proportions, lat width, and overall taper is simply enormous. There really isn't much to analyze here. This is a dominant win for the Shadow, tying the score at 1-1. Side chest is next, and even though Dorian was never particularly famous for this pose, his 1995 side chest is by far the best version he ever displayed. More importantly, it highlights exactly what Nick is missing in the upper body: deep muscle separation and incredible detail. Nick, however, fights back with overwhelming fullness. His arms and shoulders are significantly bigger, rounder and fuller, and once again I prefer his lower body from the side. I also think Nick simply presents the more powerful side chest overall. Dorian's conditioning is phenomenal, but the fullness just isn't quite there compared to what Nick brings. That said, I have to give Dorian credit. His 1995 side chest is outstanding. Even so, Nick Walker edges this pose, taking a 2-1 lead. Side triceps is next, and even though I believe Nick Walker has the best side triceps in the world today, my eyes are immediately drawn to Dorian. Now, Nick actually has the superior triceps. His midsection has become a genuine strength in this pose. His side leg is world class, and his execution is absolutely textbook. Exactly how I believe this pose should be performed today. But then there's Dorian. He hits his trademark execution, and somehow, despite never having particularly impressive arms overall, his triceps become one of the standout features of the pose. His chest looks noticeably fuller than it did in the side chest, his midsection flows perfectly with the rest of his physique, and while he doesn't have Nick's hamstrings or quad sweep, he makes up for it with incredible separation, detail, and that legendary trailing calf. Overall, I simply find Dorian's presentation more impressive. The Shadow takes the side triceps, tying the comparison at 2-2. We're going to leave the back poses until the very end, the best for last, and move on to the abs and thighs. Nick has improved this pose tremendously, but his proportions still work against him here. His upper body remains very dominant, and the lack of quad sweep combined with the wider waist becomes much more noticeable in this pose. Dorian, on the other hand, is actually very strong from this angle. His photo is taken with a slight tilt, but even accounting for that, you can clearly see the tighter waist, the much stronger taper and the superior torso to leg proportions. This comparison reminds me a lot of the front double biceps, except this time the arms are taken out of the equation, which removes Nick's biggest advantage. Because of that, I really think Dorian wins the abs and thighs. The shadow retakes the lead, making the score 3-2. Most muscular is next, and Dorianites hate it whenever we include this pose in comparisons. Their argument is always that it wasn't a mandatory pose during Dorian's era. But let's be honest, the real reason is that Dorian almost always loses this pose, and it's easy to see why. Aside from looking drier through the upper body, he's simply giving up too much everywhere else. Nick has the bigger, fuller arms, the rounder shoulders, the superior chest, and I'd even argue the better lower body. From this straight-on angle, you can clearly see that Nick's quads are actually superior as well, so there really isn't much to debate here. Nick Walker wins the most muscular convincingly, tying the comparison at 3-3, and now it all comes down to the two back poses. First, I want to look at the back lat spread, and this one is really difficult to judge. Dorian is very clearly winning the actual back. The width, the density, the detail, it's arguably the greatest back lat spread of all time. But then you look at Nick's lower body, and he absolutely dominates from the waist down. This actually gave me an idea. Since Dorian arguably has the greatest upper body from the back in bodybuilding history, and Nick might have the greatest lower body from the back, or at least one of the greatest, alongside Ronnie, Coleman, Phil Heath and Branch Warren, I wondered, what if we combined Dorian's upper body with Nick's lower body? The result is absolutely insane. And when you compare it to the opposite combination, Nick's upper body with Dorian's lower body, the difference is pretty obvious. Now, back to the actual comparison. As incredible as Nick's wheels are from the rear, it's still extremely difficult to score against Dorian in the back lat spread. Yes, Dorian loses the lower body, but it's not like his lower body is weak. In fact, I'd say it's noticeably better than someone like Samson or Andrew from the back in terms of conditioning and detail. And then there are those legendary calves, which make up for a lot of what he's giving away elsewhere. Overall, I have to give the back lat spread to the shadow. Now for the real question, is Nick actually winning the back double biceps? With the arms and shoulders fully exposed, on top of his obvious lower body advantage, this becomes a much more interesting debate. Honestly, if Nick's back were just a little thicker or a little drier, this conversation would be completely different. But it's still incredibly difficult to go against Dorian's back. And to be fair, this probably isn't the best stage photo of him. I know it's not the fairest comparison we can make, but because Nick benefits from modern camera technology and much higher image quality, let's also bring up a high-resolution backstage photo of Dorian so we can really appreciate how unbelievable his back actually was. I think people sometimes forget just how far ahead of his time Dorian really was. As much as I love Nick Walker, and you all know I'm probably his biggest fan, there are levels to this. Dorian Yates wins the back double biceps. That makes the final score 5-3 for the shadow. Now, it's important to remember that these physiques come from completely different eras with different judging criteria. I'm sure that if someone showed up on a bodybuilding stage today with the kind of deeply sunken physique Dorian displayed in the mid-90s, they would probably get marked down heavily. That was simply the standard back then. But here's the thing, as we saw in that famous 1993 photo shoot, Dorian had the ability to look incredibly full while still maintaining that legendary conditioning. If he had brought that level of fullness to today's stage, I genuinely believe he'd still be competing for, and very likely winning, the Mr. Olympia. Because at the end of the day, Dorian Yates isn't just one of the greatest bodybuilders of his era, he's one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time.